G'day folks, hope you're doing great. This is Raymond Foster. Yesterday I recorded and uploaded a video regarding the topic of Aboriginal erasure. Who is responsible? So who's to blame for Aboriginal erasure? And to just, summarise that conclusion, no, whites are not to blame. Whites are not responsible for Aboriginal erasure. Whites are actually one of the only groups who have preserved Aboriginal culture and kept alive, helped save the Aboriginal people and their culture. Those responsible for destroying Aboriginals and their culture are not whites, but in fact anti-whites, those who oppose whites. And all of the harm and damage which has happened to the Aboriginal people has merely been collateral damage, right? Because the anti-whites, they don't care who they have to harm in order to get to the white race. But all the harm that has happened to Aboriginal people has happened in order to harm the white race. And again, the anti-whites, all they care about is just harming whites. And if they have to destroy and erase the Aboriginal people from existence, ethnically cleanse Aboriginal people from existence, in order to get at me and my race, to harm innocent white people, they will happily do that because they don't care about anyone. They only care about their hatred and wanting to harm innocent white people. That's their motive, that's what they live for, that's the only thing that matters in their existence. So wiping out the entire Aboriginal race, destroying their culture, ethnically cleansing them from existence so they're extinct forever, alright, completely gone. Anti-whites don't give a crap. For them, oh well, that helps us hurt white people, and I just want to go out and hurt white people. That's all they care about. They're just anti-whites. So, that was the conclusion of yesterday's video and discussion. And I'd like to go into a bit more detail here. Now, I know plenty of Aboriginals, and I've noticed, maybe you can try to pick this up yourself, see if you can notice this yourself. The Aboriginals I know who suffer the most, who have the most issues with depression, alcoholism, a general feeling of being lost and without a purpose and direction, right? So just getting depressed and down, those who generally suffer, all right, more so, are those Aboriginals who are more focused on the anti-white meme pathogens and the anti-white lies and pretexts of, evil whitey, or look what the white man did to the Aboriginals here and there, Whereas those Aboriginals who aren't as focused on the evil white man and what has happened to their people, etc., they're not as depressed, they don't suffer as much. Alright? And some folk will say this is because of generational trauma. Okay, this generational suffering that goes on. Well, I'm going to tell you right now that there's no such thing as generational trauma. Trauma can't jump a generation. It exists in the brain of an individual. So these individuals are not suffering from generational trauma, all right? They're suffering from being traumatized, abused as children. They were abused as children. Okay, so the Aboriginals I know who suffer the most, who have the most alcoholism problems, the most depression, they were abused as children and up through their entire lives by anti-whites. They were essentially filled with meme pathogens, what are called anti-white meme pathogens, from the anti-white narrative, which then construct the anti-white narrative. And in this anti-white narrative, we all know the general story. Evil whitey stole the land off the non-whites, blah, blah, blah. oh, the suffering, oh, look, the evil, the attacks. It was like so brutal and inhumane and invasion and all this negative stuff. Poor innocent non-whites, evil whites. Alright, now you fill a innocent child, an Aboriginal child's head with these meme pathogens. They're called anti-white meme pathogens. Lies and pretexts simply created to justify the abuse of innocent white children. Alright? So anti-whites have gone around for generations now, alright, abusing Aboriginal children, teaching them lies, saying, oh, the white man did this to you and your people, the white man did this and this, alright, filling them with these lies so they feel like they're the biggest victims, have been, so much evil and wrong, alright. No wonder they suffer so much and they have this trauma. It's not generational trauma. It's because they just have normal trauma, mental illness from being traumatized as children with these crazy lies by anti-whites. When in reality, the white race is the only race, besides Aboriginals themselves, who has preserved and helped save the Aboriginals. All the documentation of the Aboriginal people that's still alive today, that's taught in schools to the Aboriginal children, was created and kept and preserved by white men and women working with Aboriginal people. So the only race who's actually helped save and preserve the Aboriginal people and their culture is white man. Yet Aboriginals are taught the opposite, the lie, by anti-whites who abuse them as children. Right? Being taught this is a form of child abuse. It's called the MPs, anti-white meme pathogens, which then make somebody sick, mentally ill, traumatized, and live within the anti-white narrative. Okay? And within the anti-white narrative, you can't be happy. Everyone suffers, and everyone is harmed as collateral damage in order to get to white people. Okay? So, the Aboriginals that I do know, who more so strongly believe and have been more strongly conditioned, indoctrinated, alright, poisoned with these anti-white meme pathogens, are deeper in the anti-white narrative, as you would expect. Alright, the more you believe anti-white meme pathogens, these building blocks of the anti-white lie, the delusion and narrative, the more you will construct that lie, that worldview around yourself and perceive that reality. So the more traumatized Aboriginals have been, the more abused they have been as children, the more they have been told to hate white people, that all their problems come from white people, etc, 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 that no matter what they do, they're just going to be oppressed and mistreated because of their race and the colour of their skin, and so on and so forth. And as well teach them that the time that you got rejected because, you just weren't that person's type. Oh, that's not the reason. It was because you're black. It's because of your skin colour. It's because you're oppressed and you were discriminated because of your race. And to fill a child's head with these lies and nonsense when nobody discriminates against Aboriginals in that way. Okay, yeah, maybe a couple of random people here and there, but it's so rare, so super rare. The general average person has never discriminated against an Aboriginal on the basis of them being an Aboriginal. They've got up them for something else, but never for being an Aboriginal, maybe for the way they behaved, for, different things like this. And then, because the Aboriginal's been abused by anti-whites, they're traumatized, right? In their mind, they think, oh no, that's because I'm black. And then it becomes an attack, and then they start judging themselves. And then they start thinking, oh, am I dumb because I'm black? Am I not good enough because I'm black? And they start thinking of this about themselves. Why? Because that's what the anti-whites have told them their whole lives, since they were children. that, evil R-word white people think you're too dumb, you're not good enough, you're this, and run them down. So these Aboriginal folk have been run down, denigrated, talked down to, ridiculed, insulted, mocked their entire lives by other Aboriginals and anti-whites, teaching them that, this is how they're seen by some fake, pretend, quote-unquote, R-word, racist. It's not a real word. It's actually just a racial slur, like the N-word, but it's the R-word, like the N-word for white people. So this imaginary thing that's not even real, it's just a racial slur against white people, like the R-word, right? Quote-unquote, racist. Not a real word. But Aboriginals are taught, like, there's racism, there's racists out in the world that want to harm them, and that the world's against them, right? And so again, something simple could happen, a little rejection or something. It's like, no, don't want to hang out with you. Or no, I don't want to go out with you. Some girl rejects a little boy or something. And instead of it just being a normal situation, he's just like, she didn't like me for this, or this. And then maybe reflect better yourself, achieve more in life, get higher, do more, do better, excel beyond your peers, yeah? Instead of that opportunity, that traumatized Aboriginal child, traumatized by anti-whites, to live in the anti-white narrative, right? Just to hate white people for them. Instead, will think, I was rejected because I'm black. I was rejected because I'm Aboriginal. So then there's no reflection. There's no, it was just because of the actual situation. It had nothing to do with my race. I've never been discriminated against in my whole life. Right? So, I self-reflect. It's because I was, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Fair enough. Then next time you don't say that, then you achieve more, then you get better, then you do more in life, you're more successful, you outgrow your peers, and, you just generally do better for yourself because you're able to self-reflect and see reality for what it is. But if you have mental illness, and then you think, no, they just did that because I'm black, because I'm Aboriginal, like you're discriminated against because you're an Aboriginal, and you believe that's real, in the real world, people actually out there discriminating now against Aboriginals because they're Aboriginals, right? Then you live in mental illness because that's not real. In the real world, Aboriginals have everything the same as everyone else. In fact, they have extra opportunities. They get a bit more. They're treated a bit better. It's Aboriginal privilege. So if the case is that in the real world, right, in reality, there's actually Aboriginal privilege, yet they're brainwashed and abused and traumatized as children by anti-whites to have the mental illness of anti-whiteism, okay, and to believe that there's evil white people who want to harm non-whites and who have harmed them, etc. Yeah? Then they've been set up to be traumatized, to have mental illness, to suffer, right? Because again, in the real world, they have privilege. It's just as equal for an Aboriginal. Every situation you could possibly have, except they have extra privilege. They get a couple of extra benefits than others. They have the best out of anybody in this country. So if that's the fact of reality, yet they're taught in their heads that they're oppressed, that they don't have the same opportunities, etc., etc., etc. So their perception of reality is skewed, so they have mental illness, so they fall into alcoholism, depression, suffering, etc. Simply so, anti-whites can use them and their depression, their anger, their mental illness to then have them lash out and attack and harm innocent white people, or just be negative towards and have a hatred for white people, right? That's pretty fucking evil, don't you think? Wouldn't it be better to be honest and tell Aboriginals the truth? And not lie to them, traumatize them, abuse them as children from childhood all the way up through their upbringing, with anti-white lies to trick them into hating white people, simply to use them to destroy white people, which will also erase and destroy all Aboriginal people. Because the Aboriginal percentage, their population, is smaller than the white population in Australia. We're like 70% of the country, still the majority. Aboriginals about 3%. So by the time anti-whites wipe out our majority, Aboriginals will already be extinct. So Aboriginals hating white people or blaming white people for anything only leads to their own extinction. The genocide and erasure of all Aboriginal people. So, let me say that again. If an Aboriginal has any hatred towards white people or a white person, the only possible result of that hatred, the only thing that can come from an Aboriginal disliking whites or being angry at the white man or wanting to get their country back from the white man, always was, always will be, the only possible thing that can come from that is the absolute genocide of all Aboriginal people by the hands of anti-whites who use the Aboriginals to erase Western kind and destroy our nation. Okay? So, if the only possible conclusion, the only possible thing that can come from hating white people and blaming white people and saying, oh, whites did this wrong to Aboriginals, etc., oh, whites stole the land, change Australia Day to Invasion Day, etc. If the only possible thing that can come from that is white erasure, which then is also Aboriginal erasure, because it's a mathematical fact again, we have a bigger population, so Aboriginal's going to get wiped out before us by the the influx of immigrants and new people coming in to live in this nation, just peacefully moving in to just be citizens, just because they want opportunities. Fair enough, nothing against them. But the anti-whites understand this destroys our people and erases our folk and our culture. And so in the same way, they understand perfectly that the Aboriginals and their people, their culture, their ways are going to be erased a lot faster and a lot sooner, a lot quicker than the white people, than the white race. So anti-whites know that any hatred or direction or blame from Aboriginals towards white people can only ever lead to the conclusion of Aboriginal erasure along with white erasure. Yet anti-whites don't give a fuck. They are happy to promote Aboriginal erasure in order to achieve white erasure. They'll just destroy any other people that get in the way as collateral damage. So to destroy our nation, destroy Western kind, they don't care if they destroy Aboriginals as well. They're happy to do that. So that means if you care about Aboriginal people, if you're an Aboriginal and you care about your folk and your tribal ways, you want to keep your culture alive, you want to preserve your people and culture, that means you have to not fall for the anti-white lies, the anti-white narrative, or blaming the white man, hating the white man, and because they just want to pit us all against each other and create racial division. Instead, we need to work together and respect each other's people, respect each other's races, respect each other's cultures, and help each other preserve our ways. Because again, otherwise, if any whites have their way, and they're able to convince enough Aboriginals and just people in general to hate whites and blame whites for the harm of non-whites, then that promotion of anti-whiteism will lead to white erasure. And again, it's a simple fact, Aboriginals are a smaller percentage of the population, so if we're erased, they're going first. Like, they're not going to last if we're not going to last. So if the country keeps getting flooded with immigrants because of anti-whiteism, the anti-white narrative, we're all done. So we all need to work together. Pretty basic, straightforward, use your brains. Take it easy, folks.